1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 steps is the average distance you will carry garbage before littering. It's quite lazy of us for a species that prides itself on being so smart. 12 steps. Can you imagine if people were that lazy when they did other things? You certainly don't see pilots going, the runway's all the way over there. What if I just sort of left this plane in the ocean and hope no one notices? If I take one walk around my neighborhood, I can easily fill a bag with the litter I find. So let's see what's in here. Now, firstly, we have cigarette butts. Cigarette butts are the most common form of litter. Each year in Canada, over 8,000 tons of cigarette butts are dropped. If these cigarette butts were laid out end to end, they would stretch over 1.5 times the radius of the sun. Still can't get an idea of just how much that is? Here's the size of the Earth. And that's just here in Canada, accounting for that many cigarette butts. It just goes to show how much litter we have here on Earth, and I guess now in space too. So moving on, we have paper products. Now, you see paper products on the ground everywhere. The reason it's so ubiquitous is because while Canada produces 6 million tons of paper annually, only 1/4 of it is recycled. That leaves 4.5 million tons to be discarded as waste. So, how much is 4.5 million tons? Okay. Donald Trump wants to build a wall between Mexico and the United States. Now, he keeps changing the numbers, but on one occasion, he said the wall was to be 1,000 feet long and 30 feet high. With 4.5 million tons of paper being irresponsibly discarded in Canada every year, we would be able to build Trump's wall using only our waste paper in just under 13 months. So if Trump's idea to build a giant wall between Mexico and the United States seemed ridiculous to you, just remember that here in Canada, enough paper goes unrecycled that we would be able to build Trump's wall with it every year. So be careful what you do with your paper, because it isn't that difficult to dispose of it properly. So next, we have aluminum cans. Now, the reason it's so painful to see aluminum cans just lying on the ground is because recycling an aluminum can takes 95% less energy than making a new one. If you were to throw a can on the ground instead of recycling it, you would waste the same amount of energy as if you had filled the can up with gasoline and then just poured it on the ground. Obviously, you would never do that because it's really dumb. But if you discard aluminum can on the ground instead of recycling it, that's equally as dumb in terms of energy waste. So recycle your aluminum cans. I know you can do it. So next we have glass bottles. Now, I'm sure you've all heard things like, glass bottles take 2 million years to decompose. And you thought things like, well, sure, 2 million years sounds like a long time, but that number doesn't mean much to me. I've never experienced 2 million years of time. Well, you can think of it this way. Let's take the first ever Homo sapiens, the first evolved human. He's living out in East Africa, doing basic human things like building stone tools or procrastinating, typical human stuff, right? So let's say one day our first human here is visited by some aliens. And the aliens give him a bottle of beer because they're internet pranksters or something. So the man, he drinks it, and in his drunken stupor, just sort of discards the bottle on the ground somewhere, committing the first ever crime of littering. Now, this first act of littering isn't entirely his fault. I mean, recycling hadn't been invented yet. But the point is, if we take that glass bottle from the time of the first ever Homo sapiens and fast forward all the way up to now, where we have things like the internet and 3D printing and TED Talks, during all this time, that bottle would have only decomposed by 10%. So if you leave a glass bottle on the ground today, remember that it could be there for a really long time. And besides, it isn't that difficult to just not leave your bottles lying around everywhere. So last but not least, we have plastic bags. But before we get into plastics, I know this has all been very depressing, so we're going to take a break and look at this picture of a micro pig. It's like a pig, but micro. All right? He's probably looking at us like that because he wants us to feed him. Well, I don't have any food right now, so you're going to have to wait till later, okay? Now, adding micro to the beginning of things doesn't always make them better. Take microplastics, for instance. Microplastics are small plastic fragments, usually too small to be seen with the naked eye. They're so small, they tend to get into waterways. In fact, 95% of litter on beaches actually comes from suburban streets through the stormwater system. And once it's in the water, the plastics eventually get ingested by small marine organisms such as plankton. Let's call this little planktony guy Max. Max Planck. Max the Plankton, whatever. So Max here, he is living in the Bay of Kiel, swimming in the warm waters off the coast of Germany. Now, Max isn't very big. So if he ingests some microplastics with his food, maybe only about a microgram of toxin actually ends up inside of him. So you go, well, a microgram isn't a lot. And Max goes, actually, it is a lot, because Max is a quantum physicist and he's used to dealing with really small stuff, right? So you go, no, Max, it isn't a lot. You just think it's a lot because you're small and a microgram to you is a lot. A microgram to us is nothing. If we ingested a microgram of plastic toxin, whether it's lead, mercury, cadmium, we wouldn't even notice because we have kilograms of body mass. So while we're busy arguing with Max, a fish comes along and eats him and a bunch of his loved ones. So if each of the plankton here, including Max, had ingested microplastics with their food, and they each had only a microgram of toxin inside of them, and this fish comes along, eating a couple hundred of them, well, now this fish has a couple hundred micrograms of toxin inside of it. So let's say this fish is on its way to the movies to watch Finding Dory or whatever fish watch, to the fish version of the cinemas, the Finemas. So on its way to the movies, it gets eaten by a larger fish. And this larger fish is kind of like us when we eat potato chips. No one ever stops after eating just one, right? So this fish goes through a bunch of the smaller fish until by the end, it has accumulated several thousand micrograms of plastic toxin. And when the fishing boat comes along, it catches not only our red friend there, but lots of other fish in similar situations, all contaminated by microplastic toxin. So while the threat of microplastics seemed small at the beginning, it's clear now that they have a big impact. Because if anyone eats one of those fish, they'll surely get very sick. Now, luckily for us humans in this scenario, the fish is going to be used for fish silage, which is feed for livestock and not humans. Fish silaging is not that common of a process, but I'm the narrator here and I can do whatever the heck I want. All right. So the fishermen combine all of their catch into a fish paste, which would be used to feed livestock, with no one the wiser that this paste actually contains a significant amount of poison, which is sure to make sick whichever animal it ends up being fed to. So, which unlucky animal is going to bear the pain of our suffering? Which poor creature is going to suffer by our doing? Well, one specific animal has been waiting eagerly for his food since I began this story. Hundreds of thousands of animals, some of which I might add are humans, die of plastic every year, whether it's eating it and being poisoned, eating it and choking, or simply being entangled by it. But it isn't that difficult to save their lives, because these deaths are all preventable if we dispose of our garbage properly. Now, luckily, there is an upside to all of this, which is that the issue of littering is really easy to fix. Littering is bad. It looks bad. It keeps showing up everywhere. It's probably filled with viruses. It's like the spam email of the environment. But unlike spam email, littering is a problem that we can actually get rid of. And here's where you come in. Because cigarette butts, they can go in an ashtray. The ground is not an ashtray. Paper products can be recycled, and so can aluminum cans. It's just a matter of throwing it into this box instead of this box, right? Glass bottles, like beer bottles, can usually be returned to the store where you'll receive some sort of compensation. As for plastics, like shopping bags, they can be reused, say, to pick up litter you found on a stage in Carleton University. Who left all this stuff here? Or think about if you really need them at all. Because it isn't that difficult to end littering. It isn't that difficult to keep our planet beautiful. It isn't that difficult to make our world a better place to live in. And you can start right now. Let there be no litter at the end of this TEDx event. And who knows, you may even save a life. It might not be the life of anyone you know, but it may be a very important life nonetheless. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't that difficult.